Let's get ready to start another episode of Miami Cop Talk. Welcome to season 2 of Miami Cop Talk. Today's topics on our first episode of Miami Cop Talk are going to be the violence and murder against police officers throughout the country.
Preliminary statistics from the FBI show that 2021 was especially deadly for cops in the United States, with 73 officers killed intentionally in the line of duty, most by gunfire, up from 46 in 2020, and the highest number in 26 years aside from 9/11. It's a problem from coast to coast. In Bradley, Illinois last month, one officer was shot and killed, another badly wounded after responding to a call about barking dogs at a hotel. In Arvada, Colorado, a 19-year veteran officer shot dead in what police called a targeted attack. Those ambush and unprovoked killings specifically are also up, totaling 33 last year, the FBI reports, a startling jump from 11 in 2020. Some in law enforcement tell us they believe criminals have been emboldened by disruption to the criminal justice system during the pandemic.
Over the past 18 months to 2 years, many of our grand juries were non-existent. Indictments didn't happen. Trials didn't happen. We know that people felt more emboldened because they didn't see or feel those consequences.
Another issue police cite, policy changes that have allowed more people out of jail pending trial. Criminal justice reform advocates say practices like cash bail have long been discriminatory against low-income people and people of color. But some policing advocates insist changes have led to more crime.
A lot of it has to do with policies in cities that are clearly making our cities less safe, allowing some of the most violent offenders back on the street to continue to reoffend.
The head of the country's largest police union also blames anti-police sentiment in some parts of the nation.
It's taken its toll, and it's eroding the lack of respect for the law enforcement profession.
While criminologists say crime is complicated and there are no easy answers to determining the root causes of a rise in certain kinds of violence, including against officers, police say repairing relationships with the community is a must.
We wanted to start season 2 by reintroducing 2 of our guests who we've had a number of times in season 1. We have Assistant Chief Charles Nanney from the city of South Miami, formerly with Miami-Dade County Police Department. We also have the famed detective Fernando Bosch. 48 Hours. We've seen him on TV solving murders, going through the accounts of the unique perspective that homicide investigators encounter, the things that they go through on a day-to-day to solve cases. The first 48. Welcome, guys. All right, guys. We're going to go ahead and kick it off by talking about what's on the news. And I got some stats here from the National Fraternal Order of Police. In 2021, there were 63 officers, law enforcement officers killed, 346 shot. They got a breakdown by state, but I'm going to go ahead and give you the stats for 2022. I will say this, we are not doing any better. We're 5 officers killed in 2022, and we're at 30 officers shot. Those are according to the stats with the Fraternal Order of Police, the National Fraternal Order of Police. I will say this, some of those numbers may not be accurate. They're actually low because by the time they get the stats in, so I know for a fact those numbers right now are high, but they're not as high as they really are. So we want to get your feel as career law enforcement professionals. What do you think is causing this animosity towards law enforcement?
Thank God, praise God, we're not experiencing it here. Although we do have 12 officers will be added to the Wall of Honor this year at Tropical Park Memorial that died in the line of duty last year. Most of them were from COVID, but there was a couple that were shot. They were 3 in Broward that were shot and killed. But policy-wise, policies matter. Florida is pretty good as a whole, and Dade County overall is good. We have a great working relationship with the federal agencies. The cities like New York and those other places, the problem is the policies. For instance, in New York, you can do 5 robberies in one day and you're not locked up. That will never happen here. And even going back to like my 2 officers killed on line of duty, they never should have been killed because the 18-year-old that killed them should have been locked away. Kathy Rundle's office tried to use 1020 life because he multiple times shot at people during robberies. So, we try to save every youth that we can, but some people you cannot save. So this this bad guy shot at an old lady after he robbed her. So based on that and based on his past, they tried to give him 10-20 life. But the judge, again, policy, the judge was able to put him as a youthful offender. And once you do that, the state attorney cannot use 10-20 life, which works very, very well. I know back after this happened, I did a story with Jim DeFeedy, and I had the two widows of my two officers, and they did a check. 80 of the 480 murders that DeFeedy went through, 80 would not have happened had they used 10-20 life in the preceding felony charge. So I illustrate that is the policies matter. If I don't charge this person who does multiple robberies on this, he or she will graduate to a more violent crime. So in New York, Chicago, and these places.
Let's talk about New York. You just mentioned New York, right? We heard Mayor Adams this morning come on national TV calling on the administration, the Biden administration, to help them fight the causes of some of the violence that's leading to officers being killed, right? They're asking for added assistance and resources. Fernando, Chief, you guys have worked these cases where you had to investigate the murders, homicides of civilians as well as officers. You've had officers who have been shot under your watch. You have had to call in added resources. Can you kind of give us, for the viewers' benefit, a view, an insider's view as to what the mechanics are of what they're going through in New York in regard to calling out all these resources and bringing them out to the street? How does this thing unfold? Something that we're not seeing in the media. What can you tell?
Well,
what can you speak to?
I think right now New York is out of control. You have to let, in my opinion, you have to let the officers do their job, back up your officers, because they're the ones that are going to catch these criminals. And if you don't give the officers the cut them loose and let them do their work, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. We saw with demonstrations where officers were just standing there, they were getting bottles, rocks thrown at them, and they were just holding them back and holding them back. You got to let the officers do the job. Like the chief was saying, there's some good neighborhoods that good people live in, and those bad people that live in those neighborhoods, they need to be dealt with. The more murders that there are, the harder it is to solve, obviously, because you got limited resources, and you only have a certain time before you get another homicide, and then that homicide gets put aside. So it's very difficult. You gotta attack this problem proactively. Whether if you need to get federal help, you get federal help, but they need to get more proactive.
Sure. So what do you think is going on right now in this call to solve these homicides? You remember, we're speaking in the context of officers who have been assaulted. Two officers were killed in the line of duty responding to calls to help civilians. Think about that.
I'll give you an example. We had when my officers got killed. I was in charge of narcotics gangs and a couple other things. Well, they were killed in the city of Miami. They were working some gang stuff. We worked with them a lot. But what I did is I used the federal laws, which are tougher than the state laws. And a lot of times, sometimes, your state attorney, they may not be as aggressive to prosecute juveniles. Well, it's one thing a juvenile, shooting a gun in his backyard he took from his parents. Shouldn't do that, but did that. But it's another thing when you're doing robberies and drive-by shootings, that person needs to be locked away. Because once you lose that respect for your fellow, human, I can't fix them. We can't, they can go on Oprah's show or Dr. Phil, Sigmund Freud counseling. We can't get people to stop smoking or overeating doing that. How are we going to rewire somebody who wasn't raised right and has graduated to the point where they have such a disrespect for their fellow man or woman that they would shoot at grandma who gave up her property just because they're evil? And nobody wants to say that, but there are some people who are evil. Most people are good. I can tell you after 33 years as a cop, the vast majority, I tell my kids, most people are good, and you're never going to know until you actually interact with a person. However, there are some evil people, and that's why we have, evil out there. So like when my two officers got shot, I was so upset. We overtook the case, and what I did is individually, everybody in that gang, they were selling guns and drugs. I sent undercover officers to buy guns, and we'd get 15 to 20 years. They all disappeared overnight, and we did it quietly so the rest didn't know. They're gone. So that a neighborhood benefited, we benefited, it made us safer. I had another one, Opalaka, Ray Robertson, he stole copies in Canine. He got shot 7 times by bad guys selling drugs. They were supposed to have an apartment with guns and drugs. They probably thought they were going to rob them. There's a lot of dopers in in drug sales areas. They'll rob like every 5th or 6th buyer because they're diversified and making money. And that person usually doesn't make a police report because they're buying drugs. So they shot Ray 7 times. Ray shot back, killed one. The other 2 we had to track down and arrest. But their gang was in Opalaka. So I was able to utilize this, what New York should do, all the federal agencies. So I had my guys undercover. I had the FBI giving us money for overtime. I had the DEA giving us money to buy drugs from them. I had the ATF giving us money to buy guns. So we did a federal RICO case where we did the whole gang. So it took a couple months, but we were able to indict 21 gang members in Opalaka. And take them all out. And actually it was nice because the guy that shot the gang leader, when we go to arrest him, Ray was now in the SWAT team. He got healed. He came back to work and went to SWAT. The guy grabbed, they're doing a search warrant, the bad guy grabbed the rifle, the cop, and the cop shot him, blew his face off. He lived, but blew like the side of his face off. Totally legitimate use of force. But Ray happened to be there. But they had terrorized the community. So we used the federal resources and the federal, they're always the Fed. So what I heard what New York is doing, they're not concentrating on the problem. The problem is bad guys. Forget the guns. Guns is a byproduct. Guns don't kill people. Guns alone don't kill people. Absolutely. It's bad people. You got states that are full of guns and they have almost no gun violence. That when you start saying gun violence, you're giving the bad guy a pass. So, and you're giving the people that have bad policies a pass. So you have to go after the criminals that are doing it. And you can use the federal resources, the ATF and all these people. Of course, if you're taking guns, if someone who's taking guns, buying guns legally as like a straw buyer and selling them in New York, that person should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But that's not what's creating the stuff on the street. It's the triggerman. Anybody that's going to drive in a car and shoot up an apartment where there's little kids going, little kids there, that person's evil. Anybody who covers them or creates policies that helps them is evil, because you get people killed that way. It's the same thing when you're the rhetoric that we're talking about cops being hurt. There's people who really believe, like over the years, I would engage, community policing. I was the cops commander for the South. When I went to Liberty City as the major, I created a foot patrol to get closer to the community. And most people, I could tell you, my guys, I did it for a different reason. I knew that people loved the cops because I got calls thanking them. But I wanted the new cops to see, hey, look, we're not an occupying army. We're here as part of the community. So I want them to interact. So, it's on police departments to do that. But what happens when you get constant rhetoric by, politicians or whoever saying that all cops are bad or all cops are this or that, you get people who are either not mentally well or criminals who justifies them taking that action against the cop. Like in Dallas, there's 5 cops killed at once by someone who believed that all cops were bad. And there's no any group's bad. It's equivalent of saying, if I got like the guy that killed my 2 officers was a black guy, a black kid, 18. Should I say now all black people are bad? Of course not. That's stupid. Everybody's an individual. So you should never taint any profession. I got into an argument with a doctor next door and a nurse friend of mine. They said, oh, you guys are killing people. I go, shut up. You guys kill 400,000 people a year and nobody knows about it. Medical malpractice. So the police is the most scrutinized, and rightfully so, because there's a lot of power to give a 25-year-old person and somebody's an individual. But don't, paint all cops or don't paint all citizens the same, same brush as a member of their group. That's the biggest thing that we see as unfair.
See, I agree with the chief also that the fund the police, you got to fund the police more. We always need more training. When you defund the police, there's going to be lack of training. There's going to be lack of manpower, which is going to cause officers to work longer hours, without having days off, and that creates problems in the long run. We need more funding. The police need more funding. They need training. Training is, and like the chief said, there's always a bad apple in every entity, there's always bad apples, but they'll get weeded out. You know, policemen are regular people, you know, regular people with a job to do. And, you know, we need to concentrate on training, in my opinion, on training, and making sure that, you know, we're accounted for if we screw up. But the community needs to, you know, work with us and understand that, you know, we're human beings as well. Funding is very important to maintain a level of professionalism, to maintain the adequate level of training. But shifting it a little bit, Eric Adams is the mayor, not the current mayor of New York, former law enforcement. We're hoping that he's going to step up and curtail some of the crime in New York. I got a lot of friends that have come down from Florida, that have migrated to Florida. You know, I guess New York's woes are Florida's blessings. We got a lot of people moving to Florida. But Jason Rivera, the young officer, 22-year-old officer that was murdered, responding to a domestic violence call, trying to help someone. His wife, Dominique, you know, when she gave her the eulogy, you know, listen, it was amazing. And she threw the district attorney out there, the Alvin Bragg, the district attorney that doesn't want to prosecute. You know, in law enforcement, we're enforcing laws, and he's a law enforcement prosecutor. He should be enforcing the laws, not interpreting them as he sees fit. But what she said hit home. And, you know, how is this affecting you personally, your families, the individuals that you know and their families? Because, again, we know that stress, mental health, there are a lot of things that affect individuals out in the community, and we're no different. Police are people too. So how is it that under difficult circumstances, individuals, you know, put on the badge and uniform every day and still go out there and do the best they can? How is that affecting the morale across the board in law enforcement?
It's a big deal, because I can tell you, like, my experience and Bosch's and like our chief, crime as a whole, in addition to my former job, I was also a professor at FIU, and I taught criminology. So I know all the numbers, both from getting them and vetting them. We're really low on crime in Dade County. If you did a bar graph, look like a pyramid, the 70s would be at one end, and now we're at the other end. We used to have 1 million people here, now we have 3 million. So crime is really low. But what you have is the contagion effect of the media, which what happens is, you know, a crime in New York gets on the news here and it scares people. But in 91 was kind of the peak of the crime. So that didn't bother us. I got assaulted, shot at all the time. I probably had the most people, most cops shot under my command, not to brag about that. But so I know what it is, but the guys, that didn't really bother them. They almost got like, it's like getting a Band-Aid going to school and everybody gives you attention. It's the rhetoric of anti-cop rhetoric, where, you know, here, this South Miami, I'm not, you know, I got to say the truth. They gave us parades last year after the George Floyd thing. We go to get coffee. People want to buy your coffee. South Miami treats the cops great. But there are some people that will see cops and they'll spit. And it's like, I don't know you. I didn't do anything to you. That really affects morale. And it affects, and if you don't catch it and try to prevent it, with the younger officers, you know, and they never experienced the violence towards us. Like, there was more violence back in the 90s towards cops, and got more chases, more shootings, more foot chases. But that didn't bother. It doesn't usually bother a real cop. What bothers is either, you know, a bad boss, like a bad admin, or citizens not treating you right in the street. But I can tell you, I could not have been treated better. People would ask me, you know, as a white major when I worked in Liberty City, how'd you treat? I go, I got treated, you know, great. I had, like, you know, every church would invite me to eat, every people, it's just, people are really nice. I go, but it's different, you know, this day and age is different. And we'll stop people, you know, from South Miami sometime, and they just like, you know, well, you got better stuff to do. It's like, no, you're going 40 in the school zone with little kids that are, you know, from Ludlam here. You deserve the ticket. You don't even deserve just a warning, because you're going double plus the speed limit. And then they get mad and take it out with it. But so, you know, it does cause a morale problem. And Bosch is on the street every day. I'm not. And he deals with people. He can tell you, you know, from his perspective.
The citizens here are phenomenal for the most part. Again, there's always going to be those bad apples and the citizens that just hate us because of what they hear, or they're never going to be in agreement to the type of job that we do. Going back to what you said earlier, I've been doing this 34 years like Chief Nanney has, and I know that he still loves what he does, and I still love what I do. You know, my family sometimes tell me, "Why don't you why don't you just retire?" I still enjoy it, you know, and you know, I'm gonna keep doing it as long as I enjoy it. And whenever I don't enjoy it, then I'll retire. Being I guess time teaches you how to deal with the public, and you know, those bad apples, you got to try to turn them around and talk to them. Like you said, I'm out on the street, and a couple of days ago, some guy was just like yapping and yapping and yapping. And you know what? I pulled him aside and I explained to him what we were doing. And before I left that scene, he thanked me. He goes, "Thank you. You took the time to explain what you guys were doing, and I thought it was something else." And that sometimes we need to do that a little bit more as officers.
No, I agree. And that's the whole purpose of the show, right? Giving the community an insider's view into law enforcement and speaking to our fellow brothers and sisters in uniform who are still in uniform, as well as those who are retired and already served. You know, you pointed both of you guys hit on a couple things. You hit on training, very, very important. I would challenge you to do a analysis of just about every case that we've had where public distrust, where an officer has abused breached the public trust, caused a major uproar in the communities. A lot of community dissatisfaction with law enforcement comes back to standards, training, and retention, right? Police officers, police agencies, smaller agencies asked to do a lot with very little. And I think the point that you guys made, and I'm going to make it very, very sensitive for you guys, to protect you guys, because you guys are in uniforms. I don't want to get you guys to talk about the politics, but I will share the reality of this. The reality is that it's my opinion, going back to what you just said about speaking to the person in the community who was speaking bad about police, lack of knowledge. It's my opinion that law enforcement does not do enough to communicate with the public and educate the public. So there's always that sense of guardedness, right? Cops are pretty much guarded. The community tends to believe what they are told. On that note, it's very important to point out the fact that police officers, the law enforcement community, as well as first responders as a whole, are being pimped, excuse me for using that vernacular, but people being abused by both sides of the aisle, the politicians who, on one aisle, they cater to police officers and say that they back them, but will do very little to support them and provide the policies that and the benefits, restore the benefits that officers need in order to stay on the job and provide them the adequate funding. And then on the other side, we have those politicians who are catering to this mentality of defunding the police. That is the most absurd, idiotic theory I can ever come up with, right? Or think of. You guys are out there protecting and doing what other people will not do. It is expensive to provide safety and police to communities. But I wanted to ask you guys, there's a bill currently. There are many bills in the state of Florida right now. We're in the fourth week of the legislative session, 4 weeks of 60 days, back-to-back legislation, where in those 60 days, the laws of the next coming years will be passed or shot down, the proposals. And in this particular session, there's one particular bill that I'm sure will affect you guys directly. And that is the so-called HALO law. And that is calling for a safe distance around police officers. Now, for those people that are watching that are not law enforcement community, that have never been in the throes of a group of people who are animated, agitated, emotionally, whether rightfully so or not, emotionally charged because they witnessed an incident of a loved one or somebody they know or in their community, of which they're hearing that the police are coming in and they're taking action in their optics, right? They're seeing what the officer's having to take action. They don't see what started the action, what caused the officer to take action. What do you think about that law, that proposed piece of legislation that is seeking to enact law that will protect the officer, provide essentially a ring around the office. I believe it's a 30 some odd feet. And can you explain to the community why such a law is important?
Having that distance gives that buffer, makes the officer could see better with his peripheral, to see that the crowd is not on top of them, and the crowd, they could be yelling and screaming, which is arrestable if it meets criteria for disorderly. But it's like, you don't do that all the time. You do that to get the person out of the area. This, you're just trying to get this arrest, and you're going to leave for whatever reason. You're arresting the person.
One of the things that this law was made for, those people that not only are filming, but they're trying to instigate the officers that's trying to effect an arrest, trying to instigate them to get a reaction, to get the officer pissed off, to do something wrong. That happens a lot.
I know from what you're saying, we have professional agitators, professional police agitators out there that are preying on those that are not properly trained. They're, just came out of a stressful situation, and again, police officers are people too, so they have to be able to self-control their circumstances in their inner being, in personal life. They got to have self-control and can't, from people cursing and saying things that are very offensive at times. How do you deal with that? It's a tough situation. And as we're getting ready to close, I want to say that we really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule and on your free time to speak to us here on Miami Cop Talk. I will agree that from something, Nanney, you said earlier, evil's real. It's out there. There's a video that's gone viral with the CBP chief Ortiz trying to build morale from the rank and file based on something that had occurred, and somebody screamed out there, the only thing you need for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
That's Edmund Burke's quote.
Yeah, and you guys are doing something, and you continue to do it in our local community here in South Florida. As we're getting ready to close, is there anything else you'd like to share with our viewers? Is there anything that you would want to put out there? It would be greatly appreciated.
Well, if I may, this is not a good time for police. There's a lot of bad talk about what's going on. We are human beings. We have a job to do. There's going to be bad officers. They're going to be dealt with. We need to communicate with the community a little bit more. And those officers out there that feel that we don't have the support, keep doing your job. This is what we signed up for. Keep doing your job, and think about the citizens out there, what you signed up for, the core reason why you signed up to be a law enforcement officer.
Thank you for joining us on Miami Cop Talk. We appreciate your audience. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share the video, share the podcast, share what we are putting out to the community, and hopefully our audience can grow. And if you have any comments or suggestions, email us at 305@miamicoptalk.com. That's 305@miamicoptalk.com. Thank you for joining us. Until our next episode.
And on behalf of Robert Asensio and Raul Carrillo, we want to thank you for listening to Miami Cop Talk. Stay connected and visit us at miamicoptalk.com.